The day my doctor told me I was finally cancer-free, I came home celebrating and found my sister-in-law in my bed with my husband. She'd undermined me for years while I fought for my life, telling people I wouldn't make it through treatment. But this time, I didn't cry. I picked up my phone and I got even. My name is Nora Ashby Merrick. I'm 38 years old, and I had spent 2 years, 4 months, and 47 infusion days getting to that morning. 47. I know the exact number because I folded a small paper star after every single one and dropped it into a glass jar on my kitchen windowsill. What Tessa didn't know, standing in my bedroom with my husband's shirt in her hand, was that I had spent 14 years of my life as a claims examiner. My whole job is reading paperwork other people assume nobody reads. Let me back up 11 minutes. At 9:14 that morning, I was sitting on the crinkly paper in exam room 4 at the Fairbrook Cancer Center, wearing the gown backward the way I always did. And Dr. Abioy turned her monitor toward me and said the 2 words in the plainest voice you can imagine: no evidence of disease. She said it like she was reading a weather report because she says it to somebody almost every week, and she has learned not to decorate it. She printed the summary page and handed it to me warm out of the machine. I remember that. The paper was warm. I asked her to say it again. She smiled and said it again, and then she said, "Nora, you can go be a person now." I walked out through the infusion suite because that's the way I always walked out. Quick pause before we continue. I'm Clara, the woman behind this channel. I write these stories because I love that little moment when strangers from different places end up feeling the same thing. If this one already pulled you in, stay with me. It goes deeper from here. I walked out through the infusion suite because that's the way I always walked out. It's the long way. You pass the recliners and the IV poles and the warm blanket cart, and at the front desk, there's a woman named Ruth Ann who has been volunteering at that desk since her own mastectomy in 2009, and who keeps the visitor sign-in book by hand in a black 3-ring binder because, in her words, the computer forgets, and I don't. Ruth Ann hugged me. She smelled like lemon drops and hairspray. She said, "You ring that bell someday, honey. Don't let them talk you out of it." I didn't ring the bell that day. I wanted to do it when my family could be there. That is the part I keep turning over. I stopped at Delgado's Bakery on Route 9 and bought a lemon cake. The round kind with the white icing that always slides a little in the box. I bought a bottle of the sparkling cider I drank all through treatment because wine made the neuropathy in my fingers worse. I called Grant twice from the parking lot. Both times it rang out. I told myself he was in a meeting because that is what I had told myself for about a year and a half, and it had become a very comfortable sentence. I drove home with the cake sliding in the box on the passenger seat. Our house is on Wexley Street, a gray 2-story with a crooked porch step Grant kept promising to fix. And I noticed his truck in the driveway and felt something bright go through my chest. He was home. He had taken the day off for me. That's what I thought, standing there with a cake box and a summary page from an oncologist folded in my purse. There was a second car at the curb, a white Kia with a car seat base in the back and a parking sticker from Ardent Manufacturing on the windshield. My brother's wife's car. I want to be honest about what I felt on the walk to the door because I've had a long time to be honest since. I felt relief. I thought Tessa was there to help him set something up. A banner, balloons, something stupid and sweet. 2 years earlier, that woman had driven me to my first infusion because Grant had a client call, and she had sat with me for 4 hours, and when the cold started coming up my arm, she had named the IV pole Gary, so I would laugh. She had braided what was left of my hair on the deck in the sun. She had cried in the parking garage where she thought I couldn't see her. I have to say that part out loud, or none of the rest of this hurts the way it actually hurt. The front door was unlocked. The house smelled like coffee, and like the amber candle I only burn at Christmas. I set the cake on the entry table. I said his name. Nobody answered, and there was a sound upstairs like a drawer being pushed shut too fast. I climbed the stairs. Our bedroom door was open about a foot. I'm not going to describe it more than this. My husband was in our bed. Tessa was standing beside it with his gray work shirt bunched in her fist. And her hair was down, and she was already talking before I said a word, which is the thing I remember most clearly. She was already explaining. She said, "Nora, it's not your home." Grant sat up and said my name twice. Then he said, "You said your appointment was at 11. That's what he said. I'm sorry, not anything else. He was correcting my schedule. Here's what happened inside me. And it surprised me too. There was no scream in there. There was no crying. I had done all my crying already. In a bathroom on the 3rd floor, in a wig I hated, in a chair with a needle in my arm, alone, for 2 years and 4 months. Whatever tank that comes out of was empty. What I had instead was a very cold, very quiet clarity. The same one I get at my desk when a claim file has a date on it that doesn't belong, because I was looking past both of them. On the dresser, under Grant's watch and a coffee cup, there was a blue file folder, Ardent Manufacturing Blue. I know that folder. Half the claims I process come out of employers' benefits offices, and I have opened 10,000 of them. The tab was labeled in Grant's blocky handwriting, Caregiver, Cert/Grant. And I thought, with total calm, why is your caregiver paperwork in a folder when you have never once sat in that infusion suite past the 1st hour? Tessa said, "Say something." I said, "Get out of my house." She started to cry. That's the other thing that stayed with me. She cried, and Grant got out of bed to comfort her. And for a second, the two of them were a unit, and I was the visitor. I stood in the doorway of my own bedroom and watched my husband put his hand on my brother's wife's back. I said it once more, at the same volume, "Get out of my house." Then I did the only thing I did on purpose in that entire room. I took 2 steps to the dresser, past both of them, close enough to smell my own candle, and I picked up my phone and photographed the front of that blue folder. The tab, the handwriting, Grant's watch lying across the corner of it, the date stamp in the bottom right where the benefits office prints the day they mail a packet out. Grant said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Nothing." And I meant it, the way you mean it when you're 40 seconds into a thing you don't understand yet. He reached for the folder and knocked the coffee cup, and a brown ring went across the top sheet, and he swore. And he flipped the folder shut and tucked it under his arm like a man carrying a plate through a crowded room. A person who has nothing to hide does not carry paper that way. I've watched people carry paper my whole career. Tessa said, "Nora, you're being dramatic. You just got good news. Don't ruin it. Don't ruin it." Standing in my bedroom, barefoot, with my husband's shirt in her hand, I walked back down the stairs. I picked up the cake box because I don't know why, because your hands do things. I went out and sat in my car in my own driveway with the box on my lap and the sun coming through the windshield and my hands shaking so hard the icing was smearing itself on the plastic window of the lid. And I picked up my phone. I want to tell you I called a lawyer. I didn't. I want to tell you I called my mother. I absolutely did not. And by the end of this, you'll understand why. I called the front desk at the Fairbrook Cancer Center. Ruth Ann picked up on the second ring with her volunteer voice, bright as a bell. "Fairbrook Infusion, this is Ruth Ann." I said, "Ruth Ann, it's Nora Merrick." She said, "Did you ring it?" I said, "Not yet." "Ruth Ann, I have a strange question. That black binder you keep at the desk, the visitor sign-in, do you still have last year's?" There was a pause, and I heard her put her hand over the receiver and say something to somebody. Then she came back and said, "Honey, I have every one of them since 2011 in a banker's box in the volunteer closet, and I have asked them 4 times to throw them out, and I never do." "Why?" I looked at my house. Through the front window, I could see Tessa's shape moving in my living room, still crying, still talking, still in it. I said, "Because my husband told his employer he was in that room with me, and I need to know what your book says." Ruth Ann was quiet for a second. Then she said, in a completely different voice, an old, flat, unsurprised voice, "Oh, that kind of question. She told me to come in Thursday. when the volunteer closet is unlocked. She told me to bring my ID. And then she said the sentence that started everything that comes next. She said, "You should also ask medical records for your accounting of disclosures. It's your chart, Nora. Every single place your paperwork went, they have to hand you a list." I need to tell you how we got there, because if you only see that bedroom, you'll think this is a story about a cheating husband, and it isn't. It's a story about paperwork. I found the lump myself on a Tuesday in March in the shower at 6:40 in the morning, and I was at my desk by 8 because I had a stack of 41 claims and a supervisor who counted them. I work for a company called Sentinel Mutual in the Leave and Disability Unit, 14 years. What I do all day is read certifications, the forms a doctor signs when an employee needs time off, the dates they list, the hours they claim, the notes in the margin. I decide whether a file is complete. I have denied claims for a missing signature and approved claims that arrived in a shoebox. I can tell you the difference between paperwork that's messy and paperwork that's built. I mention this because for 2 years, everyone in my family talked to me like I was a woman in a chair. Nobody in that family ever once asked me what I actually did for a living. The biopsy was on a Thursday. The call came the following Monday at 2:15 in the afternoon, and I took it in the stairwell between the 3rd and 4th floor because it was the only quiet place. And the nurse said the word and then asked if I had someone with me, and I said yes, because that's what you say. Stage 2, left side, hormone receptor positive, with 1 node involved. Surgery, then chemotherapy, then radiation, then 5 years of a little white pill that makes you feel 68 years old on a good day. Grant cried when I told him, "I want that on the record because I'm not interested in rewriting the man into a monster from the beginning." He cried at our kitchen table with his hands over his face, and he drove me to the surgical consult, and he shaved his own head in the bathroom the week before my first cycle and came out looking like a scared 39-year-old man with a nicked ear. And I laughed until I couldn't breathe. That was real. Whatever happened later, that part was real. And I think that's why it took me so long to see the rest. Tessa was real too, at the beginning. That's the part people don't want to hear. Tessa married my brother Wes 11 years ago. She was the one who made our family look like a family. She did the group photo at Christmas, the birthday spreadsheets, the little laminated cards with everyone's food allergies. When I was diagnosed, she set up a meal train within 4 days. She drove me to my first infusion because Grant had a client call he swore he couldn't move, and she sat in the vinyl chair beside me for 4 hours and named the IV pole Gary so I would laugh when the cold came up my arm. When my hair started coming out in the shower in ropes, she sat me on the back deck in the sun and braided what was left of it, very gently, and then she took the clippers and did it herself so I wouldn't have to watch it happen a piece at a time. She cried in the parking garage that day where she thought I couldn't see her. I loved her. I need you to understand that I loved her, or the rest doesn't land. The turn was slow, and it was verbal, and it left no marks. The first one I actually heard was at my mother's house that August. I was upstairs lying down because the second cycle had put me flat, and the vent in that bedroom carries sound straight up from the kitchen. Tessa was talking to my cousin Delphine. She said, "You have to be realistic. The doctors say the words, but the family has to be realistic." She said, "I don't think Nora comes out the other side of this one." She said, "I'm just trying to get everybody ready." I lay there with a heating pad on my chest and told myself she was scared. That's what I decided. She was scared, and she was saying it badly. But it kept going, and it got specific. She told my mother that my grandmother's ring, the one with the small chip in the setting that my mother had already said would come to me, should be kept safe in the family. And she offered to keep it in her jewelry box. And my mother let her. And nobody told me for 4 months. She told Wes's 2 kids, who were 9 and 6, that Aunt Nora was going to go be with the angels soon, and they should draw me pictures while there was time. My nephew handed me a crayon drawing of a woman with wings in an infusion chair. He was 6. He was so proud of it. I said it was beautiful, and I went into the bathroom and put a towel over my face. She told the meal train group I had given up on eating. She told the church I had refused a second opinion. She told my aunt that Grant was carrying the whole thing on his back, that he had put his career on hold, that he was the strongest man she'd ever seen. And by the end of that first year, at every gathering, the sentence that came at me from 4 different mouths was the same one. You are so lucky to have him. Nobody ever said, Nora, you are so strong. They said, Grant is a saint. I want to describe the floor of it because everybody has a floor. Mine was a Wednesday in February of the 2nd year, when I got neutropenic fever and spent 6 days inpatient on the 11th floor with no visitors allowed past the nurse's station because my white count was on the ground. 6 days. My phone had 11 text messages in it at the end of that week. 4 were from my dentist's office. And on day 3, a hospitalist I had never met slid a form across the tray table and asked me who I wanted as my healthcare agent, who I wanted making decisions if I couldn't. And I wrote my husband's name in the box in handwriting that didn't look like mine, and I signed it, and I initialed the second page, and I remember thinking, at least there's one thing I don't have to think about. Remember that form. It comes back. I checked into the Wayfair Inn on Route 9 that night after the bedroom, room 118, first floor, parking lot view. I paid with my own card. I carried in 1 duffel bag, my laptop, the lemon cake, and the plastic accordion folder I have kept in the trunk of my car since the first year of treatment. I ate the cake sitting on the end of the bed with a plastic fork out of the ice bucket bag, and then I wiped my hands on my jeans and opened the folder, and I stopped being a wife for a while and went back to being a claims examiner. Here's what's in that folder, and here's why. In my first year, Sentinel in the hospital fought for 5 months over whether my second surgery was in-network. 5 months. I won that fight because I keep everything. Every explanation of benefits, every appointment slip, every parking garage stub, every one of the little sticker labels they put on your wristband, every discharge summary. There is a running calendar in the front of that folder, handwritten, where I wrote the date and the cycle number and how I felt, because Dr. Abioye asked me to track symptoms, and I am the kind of person who does what the form asks. 47 infusion days, every one of them dated. And on my phone, photographed 9 hours earlier on a dresser in my own bedroom, a blue Ardent Manufacturing Benefits folder labeled CAREGIVER, cert/grant. I zoomed in on it on the motel bedspread until the picture broke into squares. You could read the tab. You could read the date stamp in the bottom right corner from the benefits office print queue. You could see the corner of a second sheet sticking out below the first with a column of dates on it, cut off. Maybe 15 of them visible, printed in the same table format that comes out of every intermittent leave tracking system in this country. The same format that lands on my desk 40 times a week. I could read 4 of those dates clearly. One of them was a Tuesday in February of the 2nd year. I turned to my calendar page and put my finger on that Tuesday. And my finger stopped. And the room got very quiet in that way rooms do. That Tuesday, I was on the 11th floor with a fever of 102.6 and a sign on my door that said no visitors. Nobody was in that room with me. Not my husband, not anybody. Not for 6 days. So what, exactly, was my husband getting paid to do that day? My phone lit up on the bedspread. My brother, Wes. Hey, Tessa says you had some kind of breakdown at the house today and said things to her. She's really upset. She's worried about you. Are you okay? I read it 4 times. She had gotten there first. Of course she had. She always got there first. That's the whole trick. She talks to the room, and the room repeats her. And by the time you open your mouth, you're the one defending yourself. I typed, I'm fine. I love you. Don't answer for a couple of days. Then I put the phone face down on the nightstand, opened my laptop, and started a list. Not a diary. A list, the way I build one at work, 4 lines, no adjectives. 1. Get the visitor sign-in pages from Ruth Ann Thursday, volunteer closet. 2. Request the accounting of disclosures from Fairbrook Medical Records. 3. Pull every parking stub and match it against my calendar. 4. Do not say one word to anybody in that family until items 1 through 3 are in my hands. That 4th line was the hardest thing I have ever made myself do. and it was the only reason any of the rest of it worked. Thursday morning, I was at the Fairbrook Cancer Center at 7:50, 10 minutes before the volunteer desk opens. Sitting in the far lot in my car with my driver's license already out of my wallet. Walking in that building without an appointment is a strange thing. Your body doesn't know what to do. My mouth went dry in the elevator out of pure habit, and my left arm, the one they never stick, started to ache anyway. Ruth Ann was already there in her pink volunteer vest with her reading glasses on a beaded chain, and she didn't say hello. She said, "Come on." And she walked me down the back hallway, past the linen carts, to a door marked Volunteer Services that she opened with a key on a spiral bracelet around her wrist. The closet is a real closet. Boxes of pink ribbon pins, a folding table, 2 chairs, a laminator, a shelf of banker's boxes labeled in marker by year. She pulled the box for the second year first and set it on the table and folded her hands on top of it. She said, "Before I open this, I want to say a thing to you, and then I'll never say it again. I've been at that desk since 2009. I have watched 500 women come through those doors. I know who comes with them." I said, "Ruth Ann?" She said, "I know, honey. Open it." The sign-in book is nothing. That's what struck me. It's a 3-ring binder with photocopied sheets, and each sheet has 5 columns. Date, patient name, visitor name, time in, time out. Ruth Ann fills in the top 3 by hand, and the visitor initials the last 2. Every page has her handwriting on it, that big looping teacher's cursive. And every page has a line of initials down the right side. We started with my first infusion date. It took 40 minutes to go through both years because I insisted on doing every page, in order, with a pen and a legal pad, writing down every entry that said Ashby, Merrick, N. Here's what 2 years of that binder said: 47 infusion days. 31 of them, the visitor column is blank. I came alone, I sat alone, I drove home alone. 9 of them say Tessa Ashby. All 9 are in the first 10 months. The last one is a Friday in November of the first year. 4 of them say Delphine Ashby, my cousin, who has 3 jobs and drove 90 minutes each way. 1 says Ruth Ann M, because she sat with me on a day when I got the second scan result and had nobody, and she wrote her own name in her own book, so it would be true. And 2 of them say Grant Merrick. 2. In 2 years, 4 months, and 47 infusion days, my husband's name is in that book twice. And the second time, his time out is 47 minutes after his time in his own handwriting. On a day, my session ran 4 hours and 20 minutes. Ruth Ann remembered him. She said, "Tall, a sandy hair, real polite. He stood the whole time. He asked me twice how long it takes. He left before your bag finished, and I remember it because you told me he had a work thing, and you said it like you were apologizing to me." I sat in a folding chair in a closet full of ribbon pins and did not cry. She made me 2 full photocopies of every page with my name on it, and then she did something I did not expect and did not ask for. She took a blank sheet and wrote in that same looping hand, "I, Ruth Ann Mazzarella, volunteer at the Fairbrook Cancer Center front desk. Since 2009, personally recorded the visitor entries on the attached pages." She wrote the date. She signed it. She wrote her phone number under her name and underlined it twice. She said, "Don't lose that. And Nora, don't hand any of this to family. Family is where it dies. Hand it to somebody whose job is on the line if they ignore it." I have thought about that sentence probably 400 times since. From there, I went down to the second floor to Health Information Management, which is a beige counter with a bell and a woman behind it named Devin, who has a nose ring and the flattest, kindest customer service voice in the state of Ohio. I told her I wanted 2 things: my complete chart for the treatment period and an accounting of disclosures. She didn't blink. She said, "You'd be amazed how few people ask for the second one." She slid the form across. She explained it the way you'd explain a bus schedule. Anytime this hospital sends any part of your record anywhere outside of your own treatment and billing, to an employer, to an insurer, to a benefits administrator, to a third party of any kind, it goes in a log. And by law, you can ask for that log and they have to give it to you. I said, "How long?" She said, 30 days. Sometimes faster if the request is narrow. "Do you want the whole period?" I gave her the 2-year window and my ID, and I paid the copy fee, $22 and change, and I got a receipt with a tracking number on it. And I want you to notice that the entire criminal genius plot of my revenge, up to this point, cost me $22.40 and a morning off work. Here's the part that matters, and it's the part most people would have gotten wrong. I work in leave and disability claims all day. Sentinel doesn't administer Ardent Manufacturing's plan, different carrier, different system, but people in my line of work know people. And I know exactly which 2 phone calls would have put a copy of my husband's certification file in my hands in about a day and a half. I didn't make them, not one, because I've sat in the room when it goes the other way. I have watched a legitimate claim get thrown in the trash because the claimant's cousin looked something up. She had no business looking up, and suddenly, the file isn't about the fraud anymore. It's about her. The day I pull a record I have no right to is the day I hand them a reason to throw all of it out and make me the story. So everything you're about to hear came out of doors that opened to me legally, with my own name and my own ID, my chart, my sign-in pages, my parking stubs, my calendar, my joint bank account, and eventually a woman whose job it was to care. That was Thursday. Saturday, Grant made his move. He texted at 9 in the morning. "Can we talk, please? Come home. It's your house too." I went because I needed clothes and because I wanted to see the dresser. The folder was gone. The bedroom had been cleaned in that way a man cleans, everything squared up and the wrong pillowcases on. Downstairs, there was a black trash bag by the door to the garage with paper corners pushing out through the plastic. And next to it, the shredder. Still warm, with the little basket emptied and a strip of confetti hanging out the side like a tongue. Grant had made coffee. He had put a mug down for me on my side of the table. He'd shaved. He said all of it in about 4 minutes. He said it was one time. He said it was 2 months. He said the 2 of them had been holding each other up while I was sick. That Tessa was the only person he could talk to about how hard it was, and that it had turned into something neither of them planned. He said Tessa was destroyed about it. He said her name 11 times in 4 minutes. I counted, because counting is what I do instead of screaming. Then he said the sentence that took the last of the softness out of me. He said, "Nora, I gave up 2 years of my life for you. I took leave. I turned down the Dayton job. Nobody's ever going to give me a medal for what I did in that hospital." I looked at him over the top of a mug of coffee I never touched, in the kitchen where the jar of paper stars was sitting on the windowsill in the sun. And I said the only true thing I said in that whole conversation. I said, "Two." He said, "Two what?" I said, "Nothing. I'm going to get my clothes." I packed 2 suitcases. I took the jar off the windowsill and wrapped it in a sweater. I took my grandmother's quilt, my laptop, my folder of tax returns, and the shoebox from the hall closet with the closing documents from when I bought that house at 31, 4 years before I married him. With the down payment, I saved myself. He carried a suitcase to my car. That's the kind of thing he does. I was on the highway with the radio off when my phone buzzed on the passenger seat and went to voicemail. I didn't listen to it until I was back in room 118 with the door chained. It was a woman's voice, brisk and pleasant, a little rushed, the voice of somebody working from a list on a Saturday. "Good afternoon. This message is for Nora Merrick. My name is Yvonne Trask. I'm the benefits director at Ardent Manufacturing. I'm calling because you're listed as the care recipient on a caregiver file we have here. And before we finalize a couple of things, I do need to verify some dates with you directly. It's also, well, I'll just say it, I don't want to spoil it. Your husband is being recognized at the Fairbrook Foundation's Survivorship Luncheon on the 16th. He's our caregiver of the year. So if you could give me a call back at the number, I'll leave. That would be wonderful. I sat down on the end of the bed with my coat still on. Caregiver of the Year. At my hospital. At the luncheon for my survivors. On the 16th, I called Yvonne Trask back on Monday at 8:05 in the morning from the parking lot of my own office building because I wanted to catch her before her day started and because I wanted to be sitting down. She was exactly what she sounded like on the voicemail. Efficient, warm, working from a list. She said, "Thank you for calling back. This is just a verification. It takes 2 minutes. I have a caregiver certification file for Grant Merrick. Between January the 9th and April the 22nd of last year, he took 38 days of intermittent paid caregiver leave under our supplemental program, certified for transportation to and from treatment and post-infusion care for a spouse. And there's a hardship grant from our Employee Benefit Trust, $5,000, approved in March. I just need you to confirm you're the care recipient and that those dates are broadly accurate." I remember the exact temperature of my hands. I said, "I'm the care recipient. I can confirm my name and my diagnosis and my treatment dates. I cannot confirm the rest of that sentence, and I don't want to answer it on the phone." There was a pause, not a long one, about the length of a breath. She said, in a completely different register, "All right, say more." I said, "Ms. Trask, I want to be careful, because I don't want to be a wife having a bad week on your phone. I don't want to tell you anything. I want to send you documents from the hospital with my own name on them, by certified mail, with a return receipt so we both know the date you received them, and then you can do whatever your job says you do." She said, Yes. Send it to me directly, not to the general benefits box." She gave me a suite number and a floor. Then she said, "I want to tell you 2 things so you're not surprised. First, I can't discuss an employee's file with you, so if I go quiet, that's why it's not indifference. Second," she stopped. "The recognition on the 16th has already been through the committee. The programs are printed. The foundation runs that event, not us. And I am not going to be able to unwind that in 9 days." I said, "I understand." She said, "Mrs. Merrick, will you be at that luncheon?" I said, "I'm the survivor honoree. I'm ringing the bell." Another pause. Then Yvonne Trask said, "Then I'll be at table 4. The accounting of disclosures came in 9 days, not 30. Devin called me herself and said the window was narrow, so it went fast. And I drove over on my lunch break and signed for a manila envelope at a beige counter with a bell on it. 3 pages, a table, date of disclosure, recipient, purpose, what was sent, and who authorized it. Most of it was ordinary: insurance, lab, the pharmacy, my employer's own short-term disability carrier, which was me, because I filed those. 4 rows were not ordinary. 3 of them were to Ardent Manufacturing Benefits Trust. Purpose: caregiver leave certification support and hardship grant substantiation. The 4th was to a third-party leave administrator with an 800 number. And in the last column, on all 4 rows, in the field marked Authorized by, the same entry: Patient's designated healthcare agent, G. Merrick, signed authorization on file, followed by a date. I sat in my car in the hospital garage and looked at that date for a long time. It was the 4th day of the 6 days I spent on the 11th floor with a fever of 102.6 and a no visitors sign taped to my door. The day after, a hospitalist slid a form across a tray table, and I wrote my husband's name in the box in handwriting that didn't look like mine, because I thought I was making sure someone would speak for me if I couldn't speak. He used it 11 weeks later to open my medical file to his employer's benefit fund and get himself paid for sitting in a room he was not sitting in. That's the whole story, if you want it in 1 sentence. I gave that man the right to speak for me on the worst day of my life, and he used it to speak about me for money. I did not go back to work that afternoon. I sat in the garage on level 3 with the window down until the parking attendant came by twice. Sunday, my mother called a dinner. That's the word she used. "I'm calling a dinner, Nora, and you're coming because this family does not do this." My mother's house is the one I grew up in, on Halloran Street, with the green carpet on the stairs and the same wall clock that's been 3 minutes fast since 1994. There were 8 of us. My mother, Lorraine, my Aunt Peg, my cousin Delphine, Wes, Tessa, Grant, me, and Wes and Tessa's 2 kids in the den with a movie on loud. Grant and Tessa came in separate cars and sat 4 seats apart and did not look at each other once, which is its own kind of confession if anybody at that table had wanted to see it. Tessa cried before the food came out. She got there first, the way she always gets there first. She said she had made a catastrophic mistake in a moment when everyone in this family was drowning. She said she would spend the rest of her life earning back the trust of her husband and her sister-in-law. She said the word grace 4 times. My mother reached over and held her hand while she said it. Then my mother turned to me and said, "Nora, marriages have survived worse. Your father and I survived worse. What I will not have is you tearing this family in half over something these 2 have already apologized for." I said, "Have they?" Grant said, "To the table, not to me. She's not herself. She hasn't been herself since chemo." That's not an insult. That's just what it does. The memory stuff, the paranoia. Ask any of her doctors. Chemo brain. In my mother's dining room, with a serving spoon in his hand, and around that table, one by one, I watch people's faces do the small arithmetic and land where it's cheapest to land. My Aunt Peg looked at her plate. My mother nodded slowly, like something had been explained to her. Delphine said, "Aunt Lorraine, she drove herself to 31 of those." She said it quietly, and nobody picked it up. My cousin, who drove 90 minutes each way, 4 times, with 3 jobs. Wes didn't say anything. He sat with his hands flat on either side of his plate and looked at the tablecloth, and I have never seen my brother look like that, before or since. I ate about 4 bites. Before I left, in the kitchen, with the water running, I asked my mother for my grandmother's ring. She said, "Tessa has it. It's safe, honey. It's in her jewelry box." Now is really not the moment. I said, "Okay, Mom." I drove back to room 118 and sat in my car in the lot for 11 minutes without going in. And that was the last time I ever asked anybody in that family for anything. Tuesday, I paid $250 for 30 minutes with a divorce attorney named Dolores Whitmore, who everybody calls D, who has an office above a hearing aid store and a plastic skeleton in the corner wearing a Browns hat. She read Ruth Ann's signed sheet, the sign-in pages, my calendar, and the accounting of disclosures in about 6 minutes without saying a word. Then she took her glasses off. She said, "You bought the house at 31, married at 35, down payment out of your own account." I said, "Closing documents are in my car." She said, "Good. Do not move out permanently. Do not sign anything he hands you, and do not let anybody near your medical proxy but me and a notary." She tapped the accounting of disclosures. This one. "This is not a divorce document. Divorce is a formality now. You'll be fine. This is his employer's problem, and his employer has money, lawyers, an ethics policy, and a paper trail. Give it to them. Not to your mother, not to a group chat, not to the internet, to the people whose own liability is on the line if they sit on it." I said, "That's the 2nd time somebody's told me that." She said, "Whoever told you the first time was right." This is why I love making these stories. People think silence means weakness until the proof is already in the room. Stay with me. We're right at that point. She said, "Whoever told you the first time was right." Then she said, "One more thing. Don't do anything cute at that luncheon. No speech, no scene, no ambush. Say true sentences, hand over paper, and sit down. The paper is loud. You don't have to be." Thursday, the program came in the mail in a cream envelope addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Grant Merrick at the house on Wexley Street, which Grant had left on the entry table for me with a sticky note that said, "Thought you'd want to see this. Fairbrook Foundation Survivorship Luncheon, Saturday the 16th, 11 o'clock, the Ridgeway Room at the Carrollton Hotel." On the cover, full bleed, was a photograph of me, bald, in the vinyl recliner, month 3, a Wednesday, in the green knit cap that made my head look like a tennis ball, with an IV line taped down my forearm, half smiling at somebody off camera. Tessa took that picture on her phone. She took it while she was sitting with me in the middle of the good year, when I still believed she was the best thing that ever happened to my brother. Under it, in cursive, 2 years of courage, the face of our campaign. Nobody asked me. Nobody called. My face was on 800 programs in a hotel ballroom at an event whose volunteer program chair was listed on page 2. Tessa Ashby. I opened it up. 1120. Recognition. Ardent Manufacturing Caregiver of the Year, Grant Merrick. 1140. Ring the bell. Honoree Nora Ashby Merrick. She had put me on stage with a microphone 20 minutes after him, in her own program, printed 800 times, on the cover of which was my bald head. I sat down on the end of the bed in room 118, and I laughed until I had to put my hand over my mouth. Then I opened my laptop and wrote 3 sentences. Not a speech. 3 sentences, no adjectives, nothing in them that wasn't printed on a document somebody else had already signed. I read them out loud 11 times over the next 2 days, standing in front of the mirror in room 118, until I could say them without my voice doing anything at all. Then I did the last thing on my list, the one I'd been saving. I called my brother and I asked him to meet me for coffee on Friday, the day before, because there was one person in that room who deserved to know before he heard it standing up. Friday afternoon, I met my brother at a Bob Evans off the interstate because it was halfway and because nobody we know eats there. Wes got there first. He'd come straight from the shop. He had his name on his shirt and diesel under his nails. He ordered coffee and didn't drink it. I didn't make a speech. I put a manila envelope on the table between the sugar caddy and the napkin dispenser, and I said, I'm going to show you paper, and then I'm going to leave you alone with it. I laid out the sign-in pages first, 2 years of them, in order, with a yellow highlighter run down the visitor column. I watched my brother's face go through the whole thing in about 90 seconds. He saw the 31 blanks. He saw Delphine 4 times. He saw Ruth Ann's own name in her own handwriting. He saw Grant Merrick twice. And then he saw Tessa Ashby 9 times. All of them in the first year, the last one on a Friday in November, and he put his finger on that line and held it there. He said, she stopped in November. I said, yes. He said, in November, she started doing the recovery group thing on Thursday nights. He said it flat, like he was reading a work order. And then he sat back in that vinyl booth and put both hands over his mouth and stayed like that for a long time. While the waitress refilled a coffee, nobody was drinking. When he took his hands down, he said, I sat at Mom's table last Sunday and let that man say the word paranoid about you. And I didn't open my mouth. I said, I know. He said, why didn't you tell me before? And I told him the truth, which is that in our family, anything you say to one person is in everybody's ears by 9 o'clock. And I could not afford that until the paper was out of my hands and into somebody else's. He asked me what I wanted him to do. I said, nothing. I mean that. I'm not asking you to stand up for me. I'm not asking you to leave your wife. I'm not asking you for one thing. I just wasn't going to let you find out standing up in a ballroom. Wes said, I'm coming tomorrow. I said, you don't have to. He said, Nora, I'm coming tomorrow. Now let me tell you about the 16th. I mailed the packet on Tuesday. Certified, return receipt requested, to Yvonne Trask, Suite 400. In it, the accounting of disclosures, all 3 pages, the highlighted sign-in copies, Ruth Ann Mazzarella's signed statement with her phone number underlined twice, my treatment calendar, 22 parking stubs, and 1 typed cover page listing the 4 dates from the disclosure log and the 4 corresponding entries in my chart, one of which is a 6-day inpatient admission with visitor restrictions. The green card came back Thursday. Delivered 10:12 a.m., signed for by Y. Trask. That green card was in my purse the entire time. I touched it about 40 times that morning, like a woman touching a rosary. And under my arm, walking in, I had a flat white box from the drugstore with a paper bow on the lid. The girl at the coat table asked if it was for the raffle. I said no, it's a gift. And she said, how nice. The Ridgeway room at the Carrollton Hotel holds about 240 people at round tens. Cream tablecloths, chicken and green beans, a pink balloon arch by the doors that somebody had clearly fought with. On every seat, a program with my bald head on the cover. At the check-in table, in her pink vest with her reading glasses on the beaded chain, was Ruth Ann, because of course she was. She works every foundation event they've ever held. She squeezed my hand and said, "You look beautiful, honey." She didn't ask me a single question. She had already decided to be exactly where she needed to be, at the door, near the front, holding a clipboard. Tessa was in navy blue with a headset on and a clipboard of her own, running the room like she runs Christmas. She had a lanyard that said volunteer chair. When she saw me, she came over fast with her arms already opening and said, "You came. Oh, Nora, thank you for coming. This is such a good sign." And she hugged me in front of 40 people, and I let her, because Dee Whitmore had told me not to do anything cute and because there was a green card in my purse. Over her shoulder, I could see table 11. My mother in her good coat, my Aunt Peg. Then Delphine, who had taken a Saturday off a job to be there. And at table 4, near the front, on the aisle, a woman in her 50s in a gray blazer with an ID badge still clipped to her waistband, and beside her a man in a gray suit with a leather folio and no plate in front of him. Ardent Manufacturing had sent 2 people to a chicken lunch, and only one of them was eating. The program ran on time. A doctor spoke. A choir from Fairbrook East sang 2 songs. The foundation director, a very earnest man named Paul Ostrander, talked about the campaign and pointed at the cover of the program and said, "Our friend Nora," and 200 people looked at me and clapped, and I sat there with my hands in my lap and my face doing what faces do. At 11:20, they called Grant. A vice president from Ardent read the citation out loud. I can still hear pieces of it. He said that in the worst 2 years of his wife's life, this man used 38 days he could have spent on the floor at work, sitting in an infusion suite instead. He said the word selfless. He said Ardent had been proud to support the family with a hardship grant when the medical costs got heavy. And he said the number out loud, $5,000. My mother clapped with her hands up by her chin. Grant took the plaque. He's good at rooms. He always has been. His voice cracked in the right place. He said caregiving is invisible work. He said, you don't sign up for it, you just show up. And then he looked out at table 11 and he said, "Nora, honey, this one's yours." 240 people applauded, and a lot of them turned around to find me. And I sat in that chair and let them look, and I want you to know that in that moment I was not angry. I was so calm, it frightened me a little, because I had already read the last page of that program, and the last page said 11:40. At 11:40, Paul Ostrander said my name and said the bell was the tradition, the moment we all wait for, and would our honoree please come forward. The bell sits on a small table with a white cloth, up front to the left of the podium. It's brass, about the size of a coffee mug, with a wooden handle worn dark by other people's hands. I had wanted to ring that thing for 2 years and 4 months. I walked up. Tessa was standing at the side of the stage with her clipboard, beaming, and she reached out and squeezed my arm as I passed her. I stood at the podium and put my hands flat on it because they were shaking and I didn't want the microphone to hear it. I looked at the back wall the way I'd practiced in a motel mirror 11 times, and I said my 3 sentences. I said, "My name is Nora Ashby Merrick, and that's my face on the cover of your program." I said, "I had 47 infusion days in this hospital's chairs, and the front desk sign-in book, which is kept by hand, has my husband's name in it twice, for a combined total of 47 minutes. I said, Ardent Manufacturing paid him for 38 days of caregiver leave, And the hospital's own disclosure log shows he used my medical power of attorney, the one I signed from an isolation room he was not allowed into, to open my records and apply for the money. Then I stopped, because Dee told me to stop, and because there was nothing else in me that was a fact. Nobody made a sound. 240 people and a choir in a balloon arch, and the loudest thing in that ballroom was the air conditioning. Then I turned to table 4 and I said one more line, and it was the only part I improvised. I said, "Ms. Trask, you signed for the rest of it on Thursday at 10:12. Yvonne Trask stood up at her table with her napkin still in her hand and said, clear as a bell, so the whole room heard her. I did. That was it. That was the entire ambush. A woman standing up at a chicken lunch and saying 2 words. Grant was up and coming toward the front, saying my name, saying, "Nora, don't do this here." Tessa got to the stage steps first with her hand out for the microphone and her headset on, and her voice doing that bright volunteer thing, saying, "Okay, we're running a little behind. Let's take a short break. Everybody." And that's when my brother stood up. Wes was at a table near the back in his good shirt with his hands at his sides. And he didn't shout. He isn't a shouter. He said, across a silent ballroom, "Sit down, Tessa." She stopped with her hand in the air. Then Ruth Ann Mazzarella, 74 years old, in a pink volunteer vest at the check-in table by the door, started clapping. Alone at first, slow. That awful, deliberate, one-person clap that fills a room like water filling a boat. Delphine stood up at table 11. Then a woman I had never met, 2 tables over, with a scarf tied over her head, stood up. Then the man beside her. Then it was a lot of people. And it wasn't applause anymore exactly, it was just a room standing up. I picked up the bell. It wasn't triumph. I need to say that. My knees were water and my ears were roaring, and part of me wanted to apologize to the choir. But I had waited 2 years, 4 months, and 47 infusion days for that piece of brass, and no one on this earth was going to take it from me a second time. I rang it once. It's a small bell. It is much, much louder than you think. Then I set it back on the white cloth. Tessa was still at the bottom of the stage steps with her clipboard against her chest, and her headset pushed off one ear. She hadn't sat down. She was looking at me the way you look at weather coming across a field. I had one more thing to do, and it was the only thing I'd wrapped. Ruth Ann made me 2 full sets of those photocopies that morning in the volunteer closet. One set went to Yvonne Trask, certified, signed for at 10:12. The second set had been riding on the passenger seat of my car in a drugstore gift box for 9 days, because I am my mother's daughter and I could not make myself hand a woman something unwrapped in a room with a balloon arch in it. I came down the 3 steps and I put it in her hands. She took it. That's the part I still turn over. She took it automatically, thumbs already going under the lid, the way she takes every casserole dish and every gift bag at every family Christmas she has ever run. I said, "That's yours. Don't open it here." She said, "Nora?" I said, "It's the sign-in book. 2 years of it, photocopied every page with my name on it. You're in there 9 times, Tessa. 9. You drove me to the first one. You sat 4 hours. You named the Polgari so I'd laugh." Her chin went. I said, "Page 4 is November. That's where you stop, and that's where he starts. I made you a copy of the good year, because there is nobody left in this family who'll ever believe you were that woman." I put my hand flat on the lid, on top of hers, for about a second. I said, "I believed it. That's the gift. It's the last thing I've got with your name on it." Her face came apart in front of 240 people, and I'm not going to pretend it felt good. It did not make me happy. It just made it finished. Then I walked down the side of that ballroom past table 11 without stopping. Past my mother's face, past Grant's hand reaching for my elbow, and out through the doors that Ruth Ann was holding open for me. The man in the gray suit was already in the hallway with his phone to his ear and his folio under his arm, saying, "No, today? Pull the file today." Wes caught up with me in the parking garage on level 2, jogging, breathing hard. He put his hand on the roof of my car and looked at me over the top of it and said 4 words. I'm filing on Monday. Here is what happened after, and I'm going to give it to you the way it actually came, slow and on paper, because that's how real consequences arrive. Nobody gets dragged out of a ballroom in handcuffs. They get letters. Monday morning at 8:40, Grant was walked out of the Ardent manufacturing plant on unpaid administrative leave pending investigation. He called me 9 times that day. I didn't answer because Dee told me not to, and because I had nothing to say to him that wasn't already in an envelope with a green card attached. Tuesday, a woman from Ardent's compliance office called me and asked if I would give a statement. I said only in writing and only about facts I could document, and she said that was, in her words, refreshing. I sent 4 pages. Nothing about the bedroom, nothing about Tessa. Dates, records, and the disclosure log. The bedroom was my business. The 38 days were theirs. They called Ruth Ann too. She phoned me that night, absolutely delighted with herself, and said, "A young man from the company called and asked me about my book, and I read him every line of it, honey, and then I asked him if he'd like me to fax it, and he said fax. And I said, young man, I have been faxing since before you were born." 6 weeks later, Grant was terminated. The letter used the phrase misrepresentation in support of a benefits claim, and a second phrase, improper use of a healthcare authorization, which is the one that mattered to me. Ardent did not press charges. They did what companies do. They made him sign a repayment agreement, $14,200 in caregiver leave wages, and the $5,000 hardship grant. $19,200, payable over 3 years, garnished if he misses. The foundation rescinded the award. Paul Ostrander called me himself and apologized twice, once for the plaque and once, more carefully, for the cover of the program, which nobody had ever asked me to sign a release for. They pulled my face off the campaign materials within a week. He asked what he could do, and I told him, put a line on the visitor sign-in sheet that says this log is part of the patient's record. He did. It's on the sheets now. It took him 1 email to the print shop. Tessa was removed as volunteer chair, not loudly. There was simply a different name on the spring program, and Wes filed on Monday, exactly like he said. He didn't need anything from me for it. She admitted it all in the first week, in writing, in a series of long messages that I have never read and never will. What I know is that my brother has the kids on alternating weeks now, and that he keeps a magnetic calendar on his refrigerator with their school days on it in his own handwriting, and that he has never once, not one time, asked me if I regret standing at that podium. He told me one thing about the box, and only because I asked. She never opened it in front of him. He found it in the back of the closet when he was boxing up her things. The bow still on the lid, the tape on the side never broken. He said, "You want it back?" And I said no, it's hers. It's the only thing in this whole story I gave anybody. 3 weeks after the luncheon, he came over and put a sandwich bag on my kitchen counter with my grandmother's ring in it, the one with the chip in the setting. He said, it was in her jewelry box, in the drawer, wrapped in a Kleenex. I put it on. It fits me. It never fit her. That was the part nobody ever said out loud in 2.5 years. The divorce took 7 months, and it was, exactly as Dee predicted, a formality. I bought that house on Wexley Street at 31 with a down payment I saved by myself 4 years before I married him. The closing documents were in a shoebox in the hall closet the entire time. His attorney went quiet after Dee sent 1 package, the same package, essentially, that Yvonne Trask had signed for. And after that, they stopped asking for the house and started asking for it to be over quickly. He kept his truck, his tools, half the retirement we built together, which is fair. And I have never once complained about that number. He moved to Dayton and took a job at a smaller shop for less money. That's not my business anymore. I took my name back. Nora Ashby. It cost $50 and a trip to the clerk's office. and it is the best $50 I have ever spent. Then there was the form. On a Thursday in October, I went to a notary in the back of a UPS store, at a counter with a plastic pen chained to it, and I revoked the healthcare power of attorney I had signed on the 4th day of a 6-day admission with a fever of 102.6. I signed a new one. My agent is my brother. My alternate is my cousin Delphine, who drove 90 minutes each way, 4 times, with 3 jobs. I sent copies to Dr. Abioy's office, to the hospital's records department, and to my own file at work. Devin at the beige counter took my copy, stamped it, and said, "Good for you." There's one part that doesn't wrap up neatly. Everything else in this story has a document at the end of it. This one doesn't. My mother didn't call for 4 months. When she finally did, the first thing she said was that I had humiliated the family in front of 200 people, and that there were ways to handle things privately, and that a marriage is nobody else's business. I had practiced for that call for 4 months, and it turned out I only needed 1 paragraph. I said, "Mom, I'm not going to argue about the luncheon. Here are my terms. My door is open to you. It is not open to Tessa, not at Christmas, not at Thanksgiving, not ever. If you want to see me, you come to my house or we meet somewhere, and you don't bring her, and you don't ask me to explain it again. If that doesn't work for you, I love you, and I'll be here when it does." She hung up on me. She came in February. She stood on my porch with a casserole dish in a quilted carrier, and she looked at the front step, and then she looked at me. And she said one sentence, and it was the only honest sentence my mother has said to me in 20 years. She said, "I clapped." I said, "I know." She said, "I clapped for him, and I sat there while he called you paranoid, and I've been sick about it since." And I stepped back, and I let her in, and we drank coffee at my kitchen table for an hour and a half, and it was awkward, and it was not fixed, and it is still not fixed. She comes about once a month now. She has never asked me about that binder, and I have never offered. Some things you don't get a document for. You just get a woman on your porch in February holding a casserole, and you decide what to do with your own front door. I'm still at Sentinel Mutual, 16 years now. 2 months after all this, I wrote a 1-page note for our leave unit, a checklist, really, on how to verify caregiver certifications when the care recipient is receiving treatment at a facility that keeps visitor or transport logs. 6 lines. Nothing brilliant. It went into our examiner training packet in the spring, and about a year later, a woman 2 desks over caught a 51-day file with it and came over to tell me. I have a plaque of my own now, if you want to call it that. It's a laminated 6-line checklist in a training binder with no name on it. It is the single most satisfying thing I have ever done at that job. And on Thursday mornings from 8 to 11, I sit at the front desk of the Fairbrook Cancer Center in a pink vest with my reading glasses on a beaded chain, next to Ruth Ann Mazzarella, and I fill in the visitor book by hand. Date, patient name, visitor name, time in, time out, in my own handwriting so the computer can't forget it. There's a woman who comes in on Thursdays, 41, 3 kids, whose husband drops her at the door and drives off. Every single week, that visitor column is blank, and every single week, I write the blank down, and I don't say a word about it to her, because it isn't my story and it isn't my job. But it goes in the book. It always goes in the book. And if she ever comes back to that desk in 2 years and asks me whether anybody was sitting with her, and one of them always comes back and asks, it'll be there in my handwriting. Date, time in, time out. Nobody claps while you're writing it down. That's fine. That was never the part that mattered. I fixed the porch step myself in April, pried up the cracked tread, bought a piece of pressure-treated pine at the lumber yard on 9, cut it in the driveway with a borrowed circular saw, and set 4 galvanized screws in it. It took me 2 hours, and I got a splinter in my thumb, and it does not creak. 11 years that step creaked. It took 2 hours. The jar is back on the windowsill over the sink, where the morning sun comes in. 47 paper stars, folded on 47 bad days by a woman sitting alone in a vinyl recliner with a needle in her arm, believing that somebody was on his way. There are 48 in there now. I folded the last one out of the receipt from the lumberyard. The afternoon, I finished the step, sitting on it in the sun with sawdust on my jeans and my grandmother's ring on my hand. Not for an infusion, not for something that was done to me. For a day, I picked out myself. I'm Clara, and this is my channel. I love making these stories and sharing them with people across the world. If this one found you at the right time, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.